Okay, our first clue is when we take the machine apart and we find little pieces of gear right here underneath where that gear is. That's your first clue that there's something going on there. Alright, welcome to the Sewing Machine Repair Guide. Today we have a Singer that has a feeding problem. So let's take a look at this. So as you look, as I'm turning the hand wheel, you'll see that the needle comes down, but those feed dogs are not moving at all. So we're going to investigate this problem and see if we can do something about it. I have an idea of what this problem might be. If you know what it might be, put that down in the comments and let me know. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean this machine like we always do. So I'm going to disassemble and clean it. And then hopefully the problem will rear its ugly head as we go through cleaning this machine. Yep. Let's take a look at this. Alright, so as I turn this, you notice that this gear is not turning right here. And if you look right there, you will notice that there is a gear that doesn't look too good back there. That would be our problem. Okay, like I said, we're going to do some cleaning on this machine and then we'll get to that gear. Okay, our first clue is when we take the machine apart and we find little pieces of gear right here underneath where that gear is. That's your first clue that there's something going on there. Now, looking down here under this machine, this one is kind of different than a lot of these machines with the plastic gears in that this is a plastic case construction. And so your bearings here are encased in plastic. So instead of being surrounded by in a hole of metal, we can actually pull this towards us. So we don't have to slide the shaft out through the back of the machine. In fact, there's not even a hole over here to give us access to slide the shaft all the way out. So we're going to pull this shaft out of our way, and then we're going to pull the shaft that has the gear on it out. And in order to do that, I got to take the timing belt off. So yeah, we'll have to set all the timing for this machine. And these gears look pretty good. These are the nice helical gears, which are quieter. And this gear also is in very good condition. The thing that got us here was that they use that white lithium grease, and we're going to clean that as much as we can. But grease on nylon tends to break it down, and the plastic that was used for this gear is a little bit different of a plastic. I don't know what type, but whatever type that was used, it just broke down with that grease on there over the 40 years that this thing's been around. I almost forgot. So before I get into all this, I'm going to use some Tri-Flow grease. So it's a penetrant, or Tri-Flow oil. It's a penetrating oil that helps all these little pieces to be able to slide out the way I need them to. One thing I just want to make sure people understand about me is that I have not been doing this for 40 years like a lot of the other people that have been repairing sewing machines. So a lot of these times when I'm working on a sewing machine, it's the first time I've seen that type of sewing machine. And this is the first time I'm changing out a gear on this plastic frame type of sewing machine. At first glance, it looks easier, but I don't know. The only way I'll know for sure is after doing this and seeing how easy or difficult it was. All right, that was very precarious, so I'm going to try and reconstruct what just happened. Let's see if I can recreate this. I'm going to have to put it back together, right? Okay. All right, so that wasn't too bad. So I had to push, I had to remove the cover plate. Then I had to push through the stud because it didn't want to come out. So the stud for this little bracket right here. So these two studs were holding it in. They were actually part of the retainer spring for that plate. So then you separate your gear. So it goes over here. And then start moving so you got to move this over and slowly work it out. And then once it comes to this point, then you can start pulling it apart. And then you have your two pieces. So we can put that there for now because we're going to need this later. There's a spring inside here that holds your preload on this bushing right here on your shaft. So don't lose that spring. And then we have a whole bunch of pieces of gear over here to remove. And then this shaft should come completely out next. So I'm going to have to remove or loosen this. There we go. So there's the shaft that we need. There's our broken gear. We just need to put another one there. Easy peasy. Since I have access to it, I am going to clean off all this white lithium grease. It's not so white anymore. And it's also not so greasy anymore. So one little known fact is that when you're working on older machines that had the straight cut gears, these are actually a drop-in replacement. You can use these gears on those older machines and they will run smoother and quieter, especially with the Chinese gears, which are when I've replaced gears in old machines and they just sound like a lawnmower while they're running. So I started using these because they sound a lot better. Here's our replacement gear. Looks good. Yeah, this is not going to want to move. Show you a little trick I use. So I've got these slip jaw pliers, and I just do it so they're nice and loose on here, and then there we go. Now keep in mind that I did use some Tri-Flow oil on there before I did that in order to lubricate it and clean up that shaft a little bit. And then our new one. So this is going in the same spot where the old one was, as evidenced by the discoloration underneath there. Later on, I'm going to show you a problem that I've seen in machines like this. I haven't worked on this exact model, but I've worked on some machines like this, and there's something I want to show you later on in the video up there above the needle bar. Okay, so this one goes right there. So these are bushings. Most machines don't use bearings, they use bushings. And apparently these are technically also can be called bearings, but when I think of bearings, I think of ball bearings. And so these are bushings to me. One thing I will do is put a little drop of oil here, since I've got these to where they're moving around. So they're oil impregnated from the factory, meaning that they've got oil in the metal. So it's a porous metal. It's got that oil in there. So I always put oil on the outside of these because it will soak in and help this machine to last longer. And I'll put more oil after we get it together because I'm going to wipe off some of it as we go here. So this shaft, I need to have my gear, it needs to go into there. So this gear only has one hole, one screw, and then there's a flat on the bar that it needs to go to. So you got to pay attention to that. Right, and then we also cleaned this, so now it slides in easier than it came apart, so that's good. So there, we've got that in there. So we're going to slide this in. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten this because I know where that flat is. See how I've got the flat right there, and then I'm going to slide it in so that we're good and centered on that flat. Put that in there, tighten it. Okay, that's not our final torque, but it is tight enough to hold it. The other thing is this bushing is supposed to be over here. There we go. Okay. What did I forget? Forgot this. So that won't go in there. I've got to pull this back out and we'll slide this on. We're going to keep this one loose because that's how we're going to set our timing, at least a portion of the timing. So we can tighten this bushing into place here. So we're getting there. All right, we want to have a little pressure on this, so I want to push it this way when I tighten this. So we're going to loosen. There's a spring right here, so I want that spring to be under a little bit of tension. So we're going to push this over. Just not too much, just enough to where there's a little bit of tension on there. And then we're going to tighten this on the flat there. Now we can tighten it. So how much tension is there? Is that too much? That's a little too much. It's a little difficult to turn. We're going to loosen that up a little bit. There. Much easier to turn. Got a little bit of preload on that, on this surface right here, because the spring pushes it out. Okay. This is where I want to make sure that I clarify something, what I'm doing. I am not cleaning to get this thing spotless, looking brand new. I'm looking for it to be functionally operational, because the time costs me money, right? So I've got to get a certain number of machines done in a certain period of time. In fact, doing this video recording actually makes this machine take a lot longer to do. But what I'm trying to get at here is I am not doing a restoration. I am getting this machine to where it will operate properly, and there's a big difference there. If I was doing a restoration, this thing would look like it came out of the factory, all little pieces, all brand new, looking shiny and clean. I just want this stuff to operate. So yep, I'm cleaning this little tiny spring a little bit, but I'm not going to get this little tiny spring looking perfect before it goes back in this machine. I just want it to operate like a spring. So it's just something I wanted to make sure I clarify, because some, you may see that there's still some dirty stuff going back together in this machine, but it's functionally operational and doesn't really make a difference on how the machine operates. If I wanted to make it more pretty, I could, but that's not how you make money. That's not how I put food on my table. So that's all I have to say about that. Okay, so the trick here is make sure that this right here is pulled out all the way in order to get this back on. Took me a minute. Okay, we get your clip. Wash on the sides. All right, so we've got the lower shaft held on this side, the upper shaft held on this side. Now we got to put this side back together. So this spring for the plate on top needs to go back in with the two bolts that go through. They go all the way through from top down here, and that's the two nuts that I removed here from the bottom. So that slid in through the top. I can see the bottoms, those two nuts, those bolts, and then I need the two nuts. Okay, this one needs to go in here. All right, let's clean up our work area a little bit so we can do some adjustments. We got all the major pieces in. Let's figure out what we need to do next. So our timing is completely off on this machine. The needle portion has moved. The bottom portion has moved. The belt between them is not even connected right now. So that's something we do have to connect. The feed timing and the hook timing are off from each other as well. So those two, the feed dogs have to come up at the right time in order to move the fabric when the needle is outside of the fabric. And then they come down the same time the needle comes down. When that needle's going in the fabric, your feed dogs are resetting. And then when the feed dogs come up, the needle goes back up. And then it's like that. So that's your timing for your feed dogs. And then your hook has to be timed with that needle so that the hook and the needle intersect at the very perfect time for that hook to just grab that thread off that needle. So there's really 3 timings here that all have to be aligned with each other. Needle timing, hook timing, and feed timing. This right here, this plastic gear, is what operates our feed. That's why nothing was happening with the feed before, because this gear was broken right here. And then this long shaft here is what connects your hook timing to the needle. So I think what we'll do is first we'll do the hook timing. Now, this screw that I pulled out is a lobe, a cam lobe. So that adjusts something, and I suspect that's going to be the height of the feed dogs, but I'm not 100% sure. We're going to find out here in a second. That's where that experience comes in. Somebody who's been doing this for 40 years knows exactly what that screw does.